Hello, Alamal. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mona Cottage Books. This is Books at Tea Time, and I am Selby, and today I am drinking some lovely Lady Grey tea. This is my favorite tea because today is all about books that I read during the winter. So let's get into it. Today is my reading wrap-up for winter. I was going to read from like December 22nd to March 22nd. I was planning on reading about 10 books in that period of time, and then March 22nd is the first day of spring. But the weather has decided that it is spring now, and the cloquias and the daffodils and crocuses are already popping up, and I read more than 10 books. So I met my goal, and now I'm just going to recap for you what I read over the winter season. And let's start with, I've got this is my my book journal. So I'm just going to go through the books that I read and talk about them. And I'm going to start with My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich. So this is My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Zoboi. This is an interesting one. It's set in 1984 or something like that. Harlem, US, not Harlem, Netherlands. And it's about this young girl. She normally lives in Alabama. Yes, correct. Alabama. Where her grandfather works for NASA. And she's spending the summer with her dad in Harlem. So she's going from kind of a rural setting, and she's all about space and science and that kind of stuff. And then she's going into this, inner city in the 80s. The kids are more interested in hip hop, and she doesn't like the music, and she's just very out of place. Even though she is an African-American girl, she's still going into another neighborhood that is predominantly African-American with a little Puerto Rican and stuff in there. But she feels very, very out of sorts because it's very different than what she is used to. And so it just kind of follows her summer and how she kind of learns to fit in a little bit, but also how she kind of makes things terrible a little bit for a lot of people. So yeah, it's a coming of age story, just kind of set in 1980s Harlem, which is interesting. I don't read a lot of like 1980s historical fiction because was born in the 80s, and that just seems too new to be historical fiction to me, but technically I guess it is. Anyway, yeah, it was a good middle grade book. Good for middle grade readers. Really an interesting read and something to kind of get them out of their comfort zone of maybe just fantasy all the time. It does have a little fantasy. She does kind of think fantastical thoughts a lot, but there's no dragons or anything like that in there. I'm now referencing my reading journal, and I have A Vanishing of Dragons, and I'm actually going to talk about A Vanishing of Griffins and A Thunder of Monsters at the same time. So these are actually the second and third in a series. I'm link my whole talk about it up here. It's the Songs of Magic. I did a Books and Tea Time about that. It starts with A Darkening or A Darkness of Dragons. I always get the name wrong. By S.A. Patrick. I love this series. This was a middle grade series, fantasy, really great. Go check it out. If you want to listen to the whole spiel I have about it, because it's actually quite long, and I really, really love these books. So go check those out. All right, now I'm consulting my reading journal once again, and the next book is Persephone Station. So I actually did a whole review on Persephone Station. I'll put the link up here or there, wherever it ends up being. It is a sci-fi novel. It's female-led. It's LGBTQ friendly. It's about this kind of band of misfits trying to help save a native population of Persephone, this other world, basically. It was really interesting. I gave it 4 stars. I don't really read sci-fi a lot. It wasn't a super technical sci-fi, but it was, very character driven, and I liked it. So good on that one. At this point in my winter reading, it was Christmas time, so I picked up this book, The Toymakers, and I thought, this will be a lovely little, Christmas holiday read. No, no. Oh man. I have a whole nother video just talking about this because I had to rant about this book. It was really well written. It was super interesting, but it was also really dark and not what I expected. So you can watch the whole video about that if you want to learn more about the Toymakers by Robert Dinsdale. Yeah, again, very good, but just beware, it's a little dark. After the Toymakers, I needed something light and happier, so I went with Harklights by Tim Tilley. I have another video that I talk about this, and also Witch Storm, which is another book of his. But this was a really sweet middle grade fiction. It's about nature and these little people called hobs, and yeah, kind of, it's a little bit historical fiction because it's set in the 1800s at some point, but that's not kind of the point of it. It's mostly set in the woods. And it's just a sweet read. It's great for middle grade, kind of even a little bit lower, 8, 9 years old. Can definitely read this and enjoy it. And it's just it's a nice book. Next, I finished. So I actually started in the fall. Actually, I started last year reading El misterio de la Morgue, de la calle Morgue. It was in Spanish. It's a young Poe. I don't know if they translated it into English, but it's basically Edgar Allan Poe when he is a young boy and he's living in Boston, and there's double murder down the street from him. This is a middle grade fiction, and I found it kind of dark for middle grade fiction. Yeah, I think it was a bit too much. Maybe older kids like 14, 15, but it just didn't vibe with me. I gave it 2.5 stars. It wasn't my favorite thing, but it wasn't terrible. But I always hate saying that books are terrible because there's always going to be someone that is going to enjoy it. But I just thought that it was maybe just a little bit too disturbing for younger readers. After the darkness of Poe, I wanted something a little bit lighter. And I actually absolutely love Heather Fawcett. I'm going to do a whole video series on Heather Fawcett, or a whole video on Heather Fawcett and how much I love her writing. This happens to be Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. The second book came out very recently and I haven't gotten to read that yet. So after I get to read that, I will do a whole video on this. But basically this is like, I would say an adult cozy fantasy with fairies in it. Emily Wilde is a fairy researcher in the 1800s, early 1900s, something like that. And she is on this, it sounds like Iceland. They call it something else, but basically she's out in a far off land doing research on fairies, and then one of her colleagues comes and helps. I don't know how much he actually helps. Anyway, I don't want to spoil too much, but if you like cozy fantasy, this is a really good one. And then, of course, the next one is coming out, and I hope that that one is also just as good, because I did give it a 5-star. While I was reading some other books, I was also reading The Doll People to my daughter. Now, this is kind of an older one. I guess you could call it almost vintage at this point. I think it came out in the 90s, but I didn't read it when I was a kid. I really like this one. I gave it 5 stars because it's an excellent read aloud to younger children. My daughter's 6, and I read it to her, and she thought it was fabulous. There's illustrations. It was just enough drama to make it interesting and for her to like keep paying attention, but it wasn't overly dramatic. Like, you know, some books can be just too much for young children, but this one was really good. I liked all the characters. It was a really fun, sweet premise. There's a cat that kind of is in there and it causes some mayhem, which is fun. And yeah, so this was just a really sweet book. I think if your kids are younger, if they're going to read it to themselves, maybe 7, 8, 9, and you could even read it down to a 5 or 6-year-old, a good family read. So very sweet. I like that one. I am a big fan of middle grade, and I'm also a big fan of mysteries. So this one I just couldn't pass up. This is The Secret of the Smuggler's Curse. It's a basic book. I mean, I guess as an adult who's read a lot of mysteries, it's kind of formulaic, but it's middle grade. It's probably a little bit lower middle grade, so I could read, like an 8 or 9-year-old could read this and enjoy it, and it wouldn't be overly scary. Yeah, it was just overall pretty nice, and I really appreciate, this is something I really appreciate, is when they have the characters and a little description about them. It makes it so much easier to kind of get that visual in your head, and then having a map. So bonus points for characters and maps in the front of books. here is yet another middle grade that I read. This is Antigua de Fortuna of the High Seas. So this is kind of a fun swashbuckling adventure. I thought it would be more swashbuckling. This is actually more fantasy. There's a mermaid. There's this like evil pirate wizard. So interesting and fun for younger readers, but kind of not exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking there'd be more like sailing and stuff. Anyway, it's still a fun read. I gave it, what did I give it? I have my little chart. I think I probably gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. And my last winter book, I had to go all out and I went a little on the creepy side with Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. So this book is creepy. I mean, that's what it is. It's a horror. It's Gothic horror. And so it's exactly like its name says it is. Noemi, the main character, is like a debutante in the 1950s in Mexico City. And her cousin, Catalina, has just married some dude who lives in a big old family mansion up in the hills outside. It seems like way outside because they own a silver mine or something like that. And so they get a letter from Catalina, and so then Noemi goes to visit her and gets sucked into this creepy old place. The only thing I would mention about this one is if you love mushrooms, maybe don't read it because you might end up hating mushrooms at the end of this book. I'm not gonna say anymore, but be warned about that. And it is a little bit gross. So, but other than that, I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars, and I would definitely read some more from this author. So those are the, let me count how many books. So those are the 12 books that I actually finished. Now I started some before my winter reading started, but I ended up finishing 12 within the time period, and actually I'm ahead of schedule because like I said, I was going to end at March 22nd. So now I get to go on to my spring books. So if you have recommendations for books that feel very springy and just would be great for this time of year, then put them in the comments and I'll check them out. And then in a little bit, I will make a video on my TBR list for the spring. And I will see you next time at Books at Tea Time.